Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming from right here on my YouTube channel. Again, we had a little bit of a false start there, but we're back and we're rolling. And not only am I back, but also back is the magistrate of the marvelous wonders of the universe, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing today, sir?
Well, the universe is a little tumultuous today, John, but I'm doing all right. Things are good. I'm
It
keeping
is a
that
bit
smile and moving forward, watching physical media, enjoying streaming. Watch The Old Guard with Elizabeth, and I like that movie.
I liked it too. And you know me, I'm generally pretty pessimistic on the Netflix original movies. Obviously, I love their television, but I'm a little bit skeptical on that. I didn't like that Chris Hemsworth one recently, but I really got a big kick out of the Old Guard. I like that one actually quite a bit. But hey, speaking of which, Wednesday night, I'm really excited because Amazon is doing some pop-up drive-in events, and we're going to a drive-in on Wednesday night. And I'm very excited because number one of the movies they're showing is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I'm all stoked about. The other movie I'm excited about, you wouldn't be so much, is Hook. So it's a double feature of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Hook. And I couldn't be more excited. Ann and I went out yesterday. We bought a brand new cooler for the back of the car. We're all excited. I took Ann to her first drive-in experience 2 weeks ago. It was Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks. She loved going to the drive-in, and we've been looking forward to doing it again. So that's our week going. And guys, I hope you guys are having a marvelous week as well. And listen, we do have a bunch of things that we're going to talk about here today. Here's how we do it. The first half of the show, we're going to cover a bunch of major topics. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to take your live questions. How do you get a live question in if you want to read on the show? It's really simple. You go to the tip link that's in the top of the description of this video. You can just click that or enter it manually, streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. You'll be getting your live question or comment on the show, and you'll be supporting the channel at the same time. And that's what we're going to do. Now, before we get to our main topics, though, there is one thing off the top that we're going to talk about, and that is this. Now, you guys know that one of the biggest pieces of drama going on around the world of movies and cinema for quite some time has been the whole thing with the Snyder Cut, right? A lot of people insisted for a long time that a finished, completed version of the Snyder Cut was just sitting there waiting to be released, which I told everybody for like a year and a half, couple of years. No, there's not. There's an edit, but there is no completed version of the Snyder Cut. Everybody kept insisting that there was. And then, of course, turns out there wasn't, and that's why they're spending 50, 60, 70, however many millions of dollars now to finish it and release it, which has a lot of people excited. It's going to come out on HBO Max next year, which a lot of people are very excited about. I, of course, will always be in the debt of Zack Snyder because he made Man of Steel, the most underrated comic book film of all time. But one of the questions that has been around and been talked about a lot over the last while is, okay, well, now that we know the Snyder Cut is coming to HBO Max, what implications does that have for, say, something like the DCEU? How does it fit into the DCEU? Does it fit into the DCEU in any way or at all? And that's so different people have had different thoughts. And most people seem to think it's not really going to be a part of the DCEU per se. Some people thought that it has been. We've all been speculating one way or the other. Well, Zack Snyder himself has come out and put that to bed. The Snyder Cut is not a part of the DCEU. Here's what Zack Snyder had to say. He said, for me, where the movie falls, it really starts to represent its own path. It's kind of separate now from what I would say the DC cinematic universe is in continuity. I think it's divergent in that way. And I think that's a good thing. The power of DC and one of its cool strengths is the sort of multiverse concept. They also put filmmakers first. And they say, we want to hear your individual voices, take these characters and do a run, show us what you would do in the great tradition of comic book writing and runs that have been done before with all of these amazing characters. So it seems that Zack Snyder is definitively coming out and saying, can't wait to do it, but it's actually not a part of the DCU. Now, this is important, Rob, because, a lot of people will question, okay, well, what happens then with Wonder Woman 84? what if there's a contradiction between what happens in Justice League, the Snyder Cut version, versus what's happening in Aquaman 2, or what's happening in Wonder Woman 84, or whatever else comes along? And Zack Snyder says that's basically not an issue because the Snyderverse is really its own thing. It's not, the Snyderverse cut of Justice League is not a part of the DCU per se. So if we go into Wonder Woman 84 and we see the Snyder Cut version of Justice League and we see a massive contradiction, there's actually nothing worth worrying about because Zack Snyder said it's really not a part of the DCU. Rob, I don't think this really surprises anybody at this point, but did you think there was a chance they may have incorporated in the DCEU, or have you always thought, yeah, this will be its own very unique standalone thing? How do you see it?
You know, I've always seen it as the conclusion. This whole thing is the conclusion of what I call in my headcanon, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel trilogy. Because the same way that Christopher Nolan has his Batman trilogy that's in its own continuity, while they have spun off things from Zack Snyder's continuity, like the Affleck Batman or things like that, Wonder Woman, obviously, Aquaman. I think that these three movies together will stand as his trilogy, where the things that he planted have grown into a DCEU, because obviously Aquaman and Wonder Woman are ongoing concerns, Shazam. But I like that we're going to finally get this conclusion to what Zack Snyder's doing. And it would not surprise me at all if he goes back and maybe sprinkles things in, if he does new versions of Man of Steel. And he hasn't announced this, it's just a theory, but putting things in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman that might have been extracted and not put in, and to make it work as a standalone trilogy, because they're doing the work anyway. So why not do that? Now, I'm not saying he's going to, but I could definitely see them putting stuff in, and it would stand alone then as Zack Snyder's definitive Man of Steel trilogy. And I only say that because it began with Man of Steel, but it also is the Superman's beginnings, his origins, his early death, and his resurrection leads to the Superman that we all know and love. And it leaves Henry Cavill, if he is going to come back, a place to start. And if anybody wants to go back and go, where do you think Superman came from? Zack Snyder's trilogy would stand as an example of where Superman himself was forged. Because, you know, John, everyone's always going, well, in Man of Steel, you know, Superman doesn't act like the Superman we know and love. Yeah, because he's not that Superman we know and love. He had to live for a few days as Superman and then die, be resurrected, and then he can become the Superman we all know and love. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it doesn't have to be part of the DCEU. I can't wait to see his version of it, and I hope that all three films stand as a definitive trilogy of some kind, something unique we've never seen before.
All right, guys, the question for you now is, what do you think about all this? How do you think, are you surprised that they decided to do this? Did you think that maybe they would do some sort of, tie-in, that it would become now the definitive part of it? Jump down into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down and out of the way, let's now move on to our main topics today. And how do we select our main topics here on the John Campea Show? Well, it's really rather simple. You see, you guys come up with them by going anytime 24/7 over to www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact. Once you guys get there, you're going to see a form. Fill it out with your topic or question, hit submit. It's totally free. And then maybe, just maybe, you might see your submission featured as a main topic here on the John Campea Show. With that down, let's move on to main topic number 1. And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Diego, who writes, "Hey, John, Walmart has officially put out 3 Godzilla vs. Kong toys on their site. 2 of them are available for purchase. Although the toys are children quality, the real big thing was the box artwork, especially the back. It gave us our first look at Godzilla vs. Kong concept art of the 2 clashing on an aircraft carrier, along with a new plot summary and logo for the film. 59 years since their last meeting, the Kings clash again. Let's get ready to rumble, baby." All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, The first images for the long-awaited and oft-delayed Godzilla vs. Kong has sort of come out. Now, as they wrote, this is coming from the back of toy boxes that have now been released. And you guys may recognize the image because the image itself is actually one that we sort of saw scaled. Remember that a while back? They had those kind of toy scale size, and we thought we caught a glimpse of this. Now, this is a pretty cool looking thing. The one thing I will say about this image, and let me bring it up here in a little bit better quality. The one thing I will say is that the one thing I don't like about this image, Rob, is the one thing I don't like about the image is, well, actually, there's two things. Thing number one, that aircraft carrier would sink. look at what's standing. That aircraft carrier would not just be sitting there on the water like that. It would sink. But number two is, I think the scale is off. Like, I think when you look at Godzilla from Godzilla King of the Monsters, I feel like he was way bigger than that. Yeah. Like, I feel like he was significantly larger than that when you look at that. So that throws me off a little bit. But that one little thing aside about, okay, that boat would sink, but number two, the scale seems like they don't seem big enough. That aside, it's got to get the juices flowing a little bit when you see an image like that, to see King Kong and Godzilla throwing down. So aside from those two little nitpicks, I really dig the image. Rob, you had a chance to take a look at this. I know you're a big fan of this universe. What do you think?
Dude, my juices were overflowing with joy. Let me tell you. I mean, Criterion recently released the Showa era Godzilla films from the mid 50s to the mid 70s. And I grew up as a huge Godzilla fan. I liked King of the Monsters because it was such a love letter to that era of Godzilla movies. And when I look at an image like this, it just tickles my 8-year-old self that's still locked away inside me somewhere. And I'm like, man, bring this goodness on. Scale issues aside, which I absolutely agree with, I don't think that aircraft carrier would be very stable with those two fighting on it. But just the idea behind it, the idea that they're fighting, this is exactly the kind of thing, like if I had that G.I. Joe aircraft carrier they made for the figures in the early 80s, the Eagle, the USS Eagle, whatever it was called, and I had giant monsters, they would be fighting on top of that aircraft carrier just like this. So I just love that somebody even put this in a movie.
Now, listen, I know we've had this discussion before, but I am personally very firmly Team Kong. I'm all about the king. So I'm Team Kong. I believe you're Team Godzilla, are you not?
Yeah, man, because Kong's a peacemaker. Kong's a romantic. He's a lover. Whereas Godzilla's the protector, and I think ultimately they're going to agree to disagree, and they're probably going to have to team up and fight somebody else.
Yeah, whether it's
style.
Well, and we've been theorizing maybe Mechagodzilla.
Could be.
So they're going to pull up Batman, Superman, Martha scene, and then they're going to team up, they're going to fight, and then they're going to say, now, according to the director, they're saying there is going to be a winner, like Batman versus Superman. They're not going to fight to a draw. There's going to be a winner, which I'm excited about, and I do hope it's Kong. But I got a feeling it's going to be
Kong
Godzilla.
Always has to die, man. You got to kill a Kong at the end of every good Kong.
Yeah, of course, it's not a tragedy. And listen, for those of you who may not know which way they're going, we have got this little synopsis that reads, in a new world where man and monster now coexist, Monarch, that's the organization, must lead the way to a prosperous future alongside the Titans, keeping humanity in check. However, rival fractions that want to manipulate the Titans for war begin to rise under the guise of a nefarious conspiracy, threatening to wipe out all life on the planet. Meanwhile, on Skull Island, strange seismic activity draws the attention of Godzilla and Kong alike. Could it be the rumblings of a Mechagodzilla under the surface? We don't know. We'll have to wait and find out. Question is for you guys. What do you guys think about this first image of Kong versus Godzilla? What do you think about that little synopsis? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Were you hoping for more? Is it everything you wanted it to be? Jump down into the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down, let's move on to main topic number 2. And our second main topic today gets submitted to us by Jesse Shook. And Jesse Shook writes, I can confirm that in addition to other boneheaded decisions NBC has made regarding Peacock, that they have disabled HDMI as a playback, perhaps out of some infantile desire to keep their streaming off televisions. This means anyone with an HDMI PC monitor can't stream it to their PC. I am very disappointed. All right, thanks for sending that in, man. And yes, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, now we all know that NBC Universal Peacock, that name. Anyway, they've just launched their free service, and like HBO Max, they dropped the ball. They weren't on the two most popular streaming platforms, Roku and Amazon Fire Stick, so those ones aren't there as well. Well, apparently, there's another problem. You know, some people thought, well, okay, if it's not on my Roku or it's not on my Fire Stick, we come up with workarounds. And some people would get their laptop and plug it into their TV through their HDMI port or some other method like that. Well, a bunch of people tried doing that, and they were getting error messages saying this method is not supported. It's like, what's going on? Well, apparently, yeah. Peacock won't let you use an HDMI cable, ladies and gentlemen. In a tweet, Peacock confirmed that HDMI connectivity is disabled. HDMI connectivity is not supported at this time. No. It's not that it's not supported. It's not that you didn't put in that feature. You went out of your way to block people being able to do it. Don't give me this, it's not support. You banned it. You went out of your way to stop your customers from being able to do it. Anyway, let's keep reading on. HDMI connectivity is not supported at this time. The Peacock's Cares account tweeted in reply to a user who posted the screenshots of the error message they were getting trying to use an HDMI cable. Users will not be able to view via external monitor connection. They will need to use their PCs, provided you're using something other than HDMI, probably a DVI or some kind of a display port, mobile or one of our other supported devices directly, like a Chromecast or an Apple TV or something like that. Rob, I look at this and I cannot hit. First of all, there's been a number of things that they have done that made me shake my head. Number one, just the name of this stupid service is idiotic, but I've gone on about that long enough. Then again, like HBO Max did initially, they don't come out on the two most popular streaming platforms, Roku, Amazon Fire Stick. And now this HDMI thing. And I'll tell you what this sounds like to me, Rob. To me, this reeks of the old, antiquated, old cable system kind of things. Like, oh, we don't want you being able to do this with our shows. It just feels to me like a move done by a company that is completely out of touch. There is simply, in today's, listen, guess what? If people are going to pirate your stuff, they don't need an HDMI cable to do it. No. I on my tablet right now, if I open up Peacock on my tablet right now, guess what? I got a screen recording app and I can just record it that way. There is simply no logical reason that isn't some antiquated 2003 kind of logic to impose such a restriction on people, especially when a lot of people are looking for alternative ways to view your content since you're not available on the two biggest streaming platforms. This is just idiotic. And idiotic is becoming a word that I'm finding I'm using with NBC Peacock an awful lot lately. But look, they've got the free option, which I think is great. Then they've got a paid option, which I think is perfectly fine. You get a little bit more content with your $5 a month. So you can get it for free, ad supported, with I think 7,500 pieces of content. You can get 10,500 pieces of content if you pay $5 a month. And then if you pay, I can't remember if it's $10 or $15 a month, you get the more content with no ads whatsoever. So you can get you can get ad supported for free, ad supported for $5 a month, but a little bit more content, or more content with no ads at all. So they got their different tiers. I actually don't mind them testing that out. Different tiers. Fine, play around with that. It could work out. It could be good for somebody, especially if they find that the free ad-supported version works best for them. But they've done so many other things, Rob, they've just seemed idiotic. Rob, you take a look at this, disabling the idea of being able to use an HDMI cable to watch your stuff because, piracy in 2003. But I don't know, can you think of some other legitimate reasons why they might impose a restriction like this?
No. And considering how much I use HDMI cables in my home theater system, in my computer system here to plug cameras into I mean, it's sort of this ubiquitous, easy way. Again, the decisions that are being made on these services seem like such a throwback to, I don't know, 25 years ago. I don't know who makes these kinds of decisions, because they're certainly not very consumer friendly. I mean, they're not as, it's not like Quibi, which is fundamentally ill-conceived from the get-go. but I mean, I look at this kind of stuff and I wonder who's actually making these decisions. Is somebody that's clearly using the service? They're not. Like, I don't know who comes up and makes a decision like this. Like, why would you make connectivity a problem? Like, especially if people are using, like, if you've got a television with multiple HDMI inputs that you're using, like my HDMI, I've got 3 HDMI ports on my screen. It's old, but there's more HDMI inputs on newer screens, but I use them all the time. That's how my external devices are connected to my TV. And I don't want to not be able to watch certain things because of that connectivity issue. Why would you possibly limit the way people can connect? I mean, I understand why, but I mean, if it's something that's so commonplace, it doesn't really bode well for the brain trust that's running your company if they remove that kind of connectivity. I mean, that's a deal breaker for me.
And I think it's going to be a deal breaker for a number of people. And here's the other thing. It's that obviously some kinds of HDMI cable work, right? Because it says, well, Apple TV is supported. Apple TV connects your TV through an HDMI cable. So there's clearly something specific in the app that recognizes it's being played on an Apple TV and then unlocks the capability of HDMI. Chromecast, they say, is supported. Okay, well, Chromecast connects via HDMI. So clearly there's something in the app that recognizes it's being played on a Chromecast and will then enable. Why they don't just throw the gates open and allow it to be used in general is really confusing to me. Like, if they made a solid business case, like if you couldn't pirate off of a tablet, and if you couldn't pirate off of your regular, DVI connected monitor on your computer, I would kind of get it. But why you won't let somebody open up Peacock on their laptop and then connect that laptop to their TV so they can sit back and watch it on their big screen in their living room? I don't understand their logic here. And this is not a good PR way to start things off. I don't know. Guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? Can you think of some really good, solid, regular reasons why they may want to have HDMI not be a part of their viewing experience for Peacock? And by the way, if some of you guys tried out Peacock, it's now live. Are you enjoying it? They got some good stuff on there. What do you guys think about all this? Jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down, let's move on to main topic number 3. And our third main topic today gets submitted to us by Adonai H. And Adonai H writes, I know you've been talking a lot recently about Hollywood getting production going again, even if no new movies are hitting the theaters just yet. Did you see the interview with Jeff Goldblum talking about all the safety precautions they're taking on the set of the new Jurassic World movie? Do you think that's enough? And if more studios took these measures, more productions could start up again? Thanks. All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, we have been talking a lot lately that even though we're in the midst of movies getting delayed and the theaters are still closed, movie production has slowly but surely started to ramp up again, which is important. So we've been starting to get movie production going up and running again. We've talked a little bit on the show about how could you possibly do that? What sorts of steps do these studios need to take in order to do that? Well, Jeff Goldblum was just being interviewed, and he said something that rings very, very true to me. This is what Jeff Goldblum says. He said, they gave us 109 pages. This is their safety guidelines for the set of Jurassic World Dominion. They gave us 109 pages, says Jeff Goldblum. They invested all of their heart and soul and a lot of money into making sure that we're safe, because, of course, Goldblum is in the new Jurassic World movie. I won't bore you with the details, but we're all going to be quarantined in a kind of bubble. All the crew and all the cast and testing and everything. This, of course, comes to us from Jeff Goldblum. Now, here's how this rings really true for somebody like me. The reason this rings true for somebody like me is really because of this, is that I've been saying for a little while, Rob, that if they're going to get production going again, what Hollywood and these studios need to do is follow the example that the UFC has been doing. What has the UFC been doing? Well, in the case of Fight Island, they tell their fighters to self-isolate at home for a certain period of time. Then they travel to Las Vegas, where they get quarantined again and they get massive rounds of testing done on them. And then once they show that they're clear of all the testing and that they're clean, then they put them on a plane and send them to Fight Island off of the shores of Yaz Island. It's called, off the coast of Abu Dhabi. So they had this multi-step process of self-isolate first, come to Vegas, we'll test you there and isolate you there. If you're clean, then you get to go to Fight Island. And that way you know that everybody there that you're dealing with is clean. And Rob, as I'm listening to Jeff Goldblum's description there, okay, we're all in a bubble. We're going to get lots of testing. Then we move on, because a little bit later he says, then we fly to England, because that's, I guess, where they're showing. It sounds to me, at least in theory, that they're doing exactly what I've been saying they should do, which is follow this model that the UFC has been implementing. And they've now pulled off like 7 or 8 events with no reported new cases of COVID-19 as a result of people being at the events. That system works, it's effective, but it's also expensive. And Goldblum kind of alludes to that. 109 pages of procedures. They're spending a lot of money. Some reports saying up to $5 million just for this. Not something every production could do. But Rob, if they're able to do this, and they go and they complete shooting in Jurassic World Dominion, and we see no new cases of COVID coming from anybody who was actually there on set getting it from each other, is this a model that the rest of Hollywood could then follow? And how do you think this is going to work out?
Well, I think, one, it's exactly, look, when you're in a global pandemic and people are transmitting diseases to one another, these are the kind of, some would say, draconian measures that you need to adhere to in order to keep business going. You know, the fact that our federal government wanted to open up businesses willy-nilly was absurd, and we're now reaping the benefits of that directionless way to do things. This is the way to do things, to have guidelines, to have people care, just like the WWF or whatever, MMA, what is it called? The world
UFC?
UFC, right. That's the way to do it. You have a plan. You stick to the plan. You implement that plan. You're careful about your plan. And then, like you said, you can stage fights effectively and no one's going to get COVID. I will tell you something I read this morning. Warner Brothers is saying they're setting up an anonymous tip line. So if you're working on a production and somebody's violating their I don't know,
safety protocols,
that you can call in and report on them anonymously. And I'm like, that's not a real good way to establish trust on your crew. What I think Universal's doing, what they've done with the Jurassic World Dominion, that's the way to go. Especially in Europe, you know, secret police anonymously informing on your fellow man never really goes well in Europe.
I'm going to tell you what, though. I agree with it. Because if you've got a set of 100 cast and crew that are all there relying on the fact that everybody there is following the rules to maintain your safety, if I see some jackass is breaking those rules and sneaking off set and going to a local pub, putting me at risk, putting my fellow crew and castmates at risk, oh, fuck yes, I report that guy. If he's going to put me at risk and my livelihood at risk and the project at risk because he had to go get a beer at a pub one night instead of just staying on set, you got to report that guy.
Of course you report that, but not anonymously. That's what your line producer's for. There's people on your set that, look, it's just like any other safety violation on a set. You don't, when there's a safety violation, people on crews are very vocal about it. It's like, look, we need to take care of this. I mean, look at what happened with the first AD in the train, in the bed on those train tracks, you know, and that tragedy happened.
Yeah.
You have to have an environment on a film set of trust, and people have to trust one another, and you have to have a protocol. Like if somebody violates any kind of safety protocol on a movie set, you speak up. You speak up right away. You don't do it anonymously. You go right to the line producer. You go right to your first AD and say, look, man, because safety is of paramount importance on a movie set. And what you don't want to do is create an aura of paranoia. you have to be open and you have to be transparent when it comes to all safety protocols, because it's not just health, it's stunts, it's electrical. There's so many things on movie sets that require that kind of level of safety. Now we have an extra added level of safety with COVID, but you need to be able on a movie set to be open, transparent, and honest all the time. And safety is the most important thing on a film set for your cast and your crew.
Absolutely. And all right, guys, question is, what do you think about these procedures that it looks like they're taking for the brand new Jurassic World Dominion? Do you like what you're hearing? Do you think that's going to be enough? If it works, do you think you're going to see other film crews doing it? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down, let's move into our fourth and final main topic of the day, which we also have a major update on. Let's jump into it first and start with the first basic story, which is this. This question comes to us from our friend Jack Dries. And Jack Dries writes in and asks, China is trying to get back into the cinema game, and one of their rules they have now is that movies in theaters must be under 2 hours. Do you think this will have a dramatic effect on the worldwide box office as a result? Given the reported 2.5-hour runtime of Tenet, do you think Tenet could release in China anytime soon? Maybe by August. After all, Nolan's movie, including Interstellar and Dunkirk, have done well over their thoughts. All right, thanks a lot for saying that in. And as a matter of fact, yes, like take Interstellar, for example. Interstellar did like $660 something million worldwide. 122 million of that came from China alone. China is the second biggest movie market in the world. Now, yes, China has implemented new rules for the opening of their theaters, which basically state, to minimize risk, a movie can't be longer than 2 hours that plays in the cinema. Their rationale is, look, if you are in a room with somebody that's got COVID, you're not going to automatically get it just by walking in the same room. But the longer you're in that room with them, the higher the chances become. Every minute that passes, the higher the chances become that you could contract it from them. That's their rationale, at any rate. So they have this rule implemented, 2-hour maximum. This presents a major problem, of course, for a movie like Tenet. A major problem. Now, this comes to us from IndieWire that writes, as if there weren't enough issues complicating theatrical releases, China has announced a new barrier. While it's allowing theaters to reopen as of July 20th, that permission comes with a caveat. A time limit of the length of time the audiences spend in the auditoriums. All titles must run 2 hours or less. Christopher Nolan's Tenet, currently slated for release on August 12th, clocks in at 150 minutes, according to reports. That's 2.5 hours of the Korean ratings board this week, a full half hour over the time limit. So, Rob, we take that information and we come into today's show being ready to discuss what does Tenet now do? What does Tenet do? As a matter of fact, I even made that the topic of today's question of the day. And I asked people, I put this up just before the show started. I asked people very simply this. I asked, if China maintains its new 2-hour time limit for movies in theaters, what will, not should, but what will movies like Tenet do? And 3,400 of you guys have already responded. 18% of you say they will edit the film down to 2 hours. 52% of you say they will wait until China lifts the restrictions. And right now, China hasn't given a date as to when they'll lift those restrictions. And 30% of you say they'll skip a Chinese release altogether. No chance that happens. Not with 122 million from Interstellar coming just from China alone. So it really came down to, will they edit the film down to 2 hours or will they wait? Well, I think we already got our answer.
We did.
Because breaking news, everybody. It is now official. Christopher Nolan's Tenet has been delayed again. It has now been bumped. Remember, we're supposed to open July 17th, then I think July 30th, then August 12th, and it has now been delayed again, and now there's no date. There's no date. It has now technically been delayed indefinitely. This comes to us from Variety, who writes, Warner Brothers has removed Tenet from its release calendar, delivering a big blow on the exhibition industry at a time when movie theaters had hoped to peg their reopening to the late summer debut of Christopher Nolan's sci-fi thriller. Though necessary given the mass uncertainty over when cinemas across the globe can safely reopen, the decision further complicates Hollywood's already bumpy plan to revive moviegoing. Tenet was originally scheduled to debut on July 17th, but was pushed back twice till August 12th. It's unclear when it will now welcome audiences, but the studio plans to share a new release date imminently. And this is what they said, Warner Brothers said officially. We will share a new 2020 release date imminently for Tenet, Christopher Nolan's wholly original and mind-blowing feature, said Warner Brothers chairman Toby Emmerich in a statement. We are not treating Tenet like a traditional global day-and-date release, and our upcoming marketing and distribution plans will reflect that. Rob, one cannot help but believe that, oh yeah, this is tied into the China thing. I really don't think there is a lot of coincidence here. Now, we have been speculating already that we thought there was a pretty good chance it was going to get bumped off the August 12th date already. But I also do not believe that it's a coincidence that just after this whole thing about the 2-hour time limit thing comes, which China has not given a deadline to, like when they're going to pull that restriction, that then Warner Brothers comes out and says, well, we're indefinitely delaying thing. I'm not saying it's the exclusive reason, because I do believe they were thinking about it anyway, but there is no reality that I believe exists where the China decision to have a 2-hour limit on their movies being released in their theaters didn't at least play into the decision, at least to some degree, for this thing to be delayed again. Now, Toby Emmerich is saying here, Rob, he's still saying 2020. He's specifically still saying 2020. So whether that's September or October or whatever, he says they'll share a release date imminently. I think if they had a release date already, they just would have told us a new date. I think they're still trying to work that out, because I still think they're trying to figure out and probably talking to the Chinese authorities about, hey, when are you going to lift this 2-hour limit? Because there's no way in hell Christopher Nolan is going to let us edit his film from 2.5 hours down to 2 hours. That's just not going to happen. So I don't know, Rob, you see this whole situation. What do you make of it, man?
We knew it was coming. What I find really interesting, on Deadline, they're reporting that look for an unconventional release strategy now, which that's interesting to me. Because, traditionally, John, American movies would open in the United States and then they would move out abroad. Then, of course, it became day and date worldwide, with a lot of territories with big movies like Endgame because of fears of spoilers or piracy or whatever. But nowadays, what if, we're not doing such a hot job managing our own country the way we're going now, unfortunately. So we're at fault. The United States is at fault right now. This is why we're not going to get Tenet. It's why we're not going to get probably a lot of movies. But I could see them releasing this film in foreign markets first, because a lot of movies now make a lot more money in foreign markets than they do here, especially action films. James Bond movies do much better foreign now than they do domestically. So I could see if they can get a movie into China. Europe is opening. I had friends of mine, they went and saw Unhinged this weekend in German cinemas. By the way, in German cinemas, they actually have to fill out a form to go see a movie that you talk about your health situation and things like that. And it's happening around the world. Theaters are opening up. New movies are starting to play. But this was not unexpected because, like we've said before, John, a movie like a $250 million movie like Tenet, they borrow the money. And the repayment schedule to the banks is based around when the movie opens. And since it didn't open on July 17th, now we don't know when it's going to open. The banks are expecting to be paid back the money, and you've got interest payments. So it's actually costing a studio money to delay these movies, a lot of money, unless they can come to some terms with their lenders. And they need these movies to open and play. So who knows? And I want this movie in my mind. I want to see this movie so damn bad, John.
Me too. And listen, we are entering this territory now where things that we did not think could happen before because of the context, as the context changes, we got to reevaluate our positions. Like, Rob, I've said for the longest time, I said for a long time, no, they're not going to roll it out in Australia and then roll it out in Germany and then roll it in a couple of foreign markets and then maybe 3 or 4 months later roll it out in the United States. That's just not the way Hollywood does things.
No.
That's not the way it works, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? People like me have to recognize when the context continues to evolve and to change. We're now in a situation where even August 12th wasn't good enough for them to get this movie up and running and ready to go. It's going to be, now the word indefinitely is being used. And when you get into unprecedented times, because I know there's a lot of people out there who have agreed with me when I've said before that, no, you can't roll it out in other markets, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? We are now living in a world today and in a context today that is significantly different than it was just 8 weeks ago. And now what would have been considered an impossibility, you now got to think is a possibility. You know, I thought at one point that Tenet was going to hit its July. Back in February, March, I thought it was going to hit July. So most of us did. And then they delayed it. And then they delayed it again. Never thought this would happen, but now it is. And like, when you get into unprecedented times, you have to accept the possibility of unprecedented chances, of unprecedented possibilities that you would not have considered before. Rob, just 3 weeks ago, I would have said there's no way. There's no way they'll do just sporadic international releases first, open it where it can be open, and then do something later. But that was 3 weeks ago. Today, I think you might be right. I'm not saying they're going to do that.
Me neither.
But I think you have to be open to that could possibly happen. What is impossible in one set of circumstances may be your only viable option in another set of circumstances, right? So I don't know, Rob, you hearing him saying though that it's going to be a 2020 release date. Do you think they'll stick to that? Do you think it will come out in 2020?
You know, it's hard to say because of the sliding, the changing reality of the world. I mean, there's other countries that are going back into certain lockdowns. This virus is very pernicious. I mean, it comes back again with a vengeance. So I think it really is we're gonna have to see, and hopefully we can get a handle on it. You know, someone said that if we all wore masks in the United States, we could really tamp this virus down in 8 weeks. But are people going to do that? It's really up to us. And man, I can't see this movie coming out in 2020. I mean, then because it's not just this movie, they'd have to all the other movies that have been pushed back. Warner Brothers now has Wonder Woman 84 to come out. They don't want to take away anything they don't want to have their own movies competing against one another. I think Mulan will be the next shoe to drop its release date, and everything keeps getting pushed back. I mean, the only thing that makes me excited, John, is that 2021 might wind up being the most exciting year in motion picture movie going ever. And that could be kind of cool.
There is one thing I still feel pretty good about right now. And tell me if you agree with this. There's no way Warner Brothers is going to put Tenet out on VOD. I still, even in this circumstance, I mean, hey, talk to us again in 4 months. If the world is still shut down, if maybe we talk differently. But as of right now, I just don't see there being any way that they do this as a VOD. For some people saying, just released on VOD. There's no way. This movie needs to make so much money.
Yeah, I mean,
to break it. There's no way.
The economic realities are such that they physically can't do that. When you make a movie that costs $250 million, same thing with No Time to Die. A $250 million movie, you need $800 million to $1 billion just to break even, really. And these are both movies that they're expecting big things from. And there's nothing on SVOD would leave them hundreds of millions of dollars in the hole. And they just can't do that. And, you know, there's already like No Time to Die was having they had planned to have Billie Eilish release her song. I mean, she was everywhere singing the No Time to Die theme. She was on British television. She was on award shows, and all of that was for naught. And No Time to Die is in the same boat that this movie's in, another $250 million film. They can't, how much marketing, they're going to have to remarket both of these movies almost from scratch. And that's more money. And so these films have to go out theatrically. They have to go out worldwide. They got to go big, or no one's going to go home because they won't have jobs. The studio needs to make that big fat money on these films. Otherwise, they're going to be in a world of hurt.
Not to mention with Tenet, there's also a contractual thing with Tenet where Christopher Nolan gets 20% of the box office. So I don't even think I think he could sue them to make sure that gets a theatrical release. So I don't think that adds to the intrigue as well. So guys, here we go. Tenet, it's official, is now indefinitely delayed. They're still saying 2020. But then again, they told us August 12th, and here we are. What do you guys think about that? Do you agree with me? Do you think this is absolutely at least partially influenced by the fact that China said no movies over 2 hours? I think that's got to play a part of it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys. With all of that down and out of the way, let's now move in and start taking your live comments and questions. Again, if you want to get a live comment or question on, you can simply go over to streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. You can just click on the link that's in the top of the description of this video as well. You'll be getting your question on the show, and you'll be supporting this show at the same time. All right, guys, let's dive into it. And we're going to get things started off here with an anonymous viewer who writes in, "Hey, John, did you get a chance to see the neon red band trailer for the Canadian horror movie Possessor? Keep on the filthy." All right, man. Thanks for sending that in. And I did see it. I think it's David Cronenberg's kid who did that, is it not? So I think it's a Cronenberg who did it. It looks interesting. Rob, it's some really cool imagery, but I didn't see anything in there to get me excited yet. So I'm like, okay, I have no idea what this is. If I have no idea what it is, and I have no context for this wacky imagery, then I can't get excited about it yet. And I've heard a lot of people are really excited about it, but I just couldn't get there. What did you think about it?
Well, I'm one of those people because I read the reviews. I think it played Sundance.
Oh, see, I haven't read the reviews.
And the reviews are great. It says it's totally hardcore and extreme. I admit they don't really do, they completely don't give you a sense of what the movie's about at all. And apparently it's about a woman who can possess other people's bodies and minds to commit assassinations or something. And it's supposed to be hideously violent and really disturbing. And I am so excited. I mean, he's been trying to make this movie for, I think, 8 years. His last movie, Antiviral, I quite liked. I own it on Blu-ray, if you can believe that. Antiviral. And I'm really excited for this film. I think Brandon Cronenberg is taking up the mantle of his father, and I, for one, am very excited.
Well, I mean, the way you describe it sounds exciting to me, so I don't know. Maybe there'll be something to that. All right, next up. Anonymous viewer writes, "How does Lord of the Rings pull off having a great villain, even though Sauron doesn't have any character development and we don't really get to see him? Thanks." Well, I would say that it's because he's got, what's the word I'm looking for? When somebody could, Sauron has proxy villains in the Lord of the Rings films, right? There's always a proxy villain, somebody who stands in for Sauron, who is the villain right now. Whether you go into like the Hobbit films and the proxy villain there for Sauron is the White Orc, or whether you go into the Lord of the Rings films, the proxy villain at any given time could be Saruman, could be your proxy villain. The Wraiths could be your proxy villains. So there's always a bad guy, even though they're not the bad guy behind the scenes. And those characters, Saruman and all these, they all had their own stories and they all had their own stuff. So they were kind of the proxy villains while the big evil threat stood behind the scenes not getting developed. That's how they did that. Rob, how would you define that? How would you explain that?
Well, I think you did a great job. But what's really interesting is if you go back into the history of Middle-earth, the First Age, the Second Age, specifically the Second Age, Sauron was a dude, had human form and is a scheming, awesome villain. So who manipulates societies of men, dwarves, elves. It's going to be really interesting to see one who is going to play that character and how they're going to do that, because the Second Age, the First and Second Age of Middle-earth is really interesting. And we saw the end where the new Middle-earth series will end will be that battle that we see at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring. That's the end of the Second Age when they defeat Sauron. And I think it's going to be cool because they can make Sauron himself in human form. He's not called Sauron, but he could be a really cool villain on his own. But like you said, proxy villains, they did a great job with the proxy villains in the Lord of the Rings show, the movies, the trilogy. And I thought the way you describe proxy villains is great. You know, he has his agents of chaos out there working it to bring, whether it's the Black Riders, you know, he's got the Black Riders, like you said, Saruman, the different orcs, all of those things. Grima Wormtongue. I mean, great stuff.
All right, next up, we go to James Welsh, who writes, one of two. The reason The Godfather could not win 11 Oscars because it was not nominated for the technical categories like Ben-Hur, Lord of the Rings, and Titanic. The reason I think Dune could win 11 is because, like those three, it possibly will be voted in technical categories. Plus, with a cast like Timothée Chalamet, Javier Bardem, and Oscar Isaac acting, wins could let it surpass those three. This movie is going to be a big budget epic film like the three current record holders. If it's as good as the source material, it stands a chance. Well, I mean, okay, so for those of you who don't know, James wrote in the other day wondering if that, because I said, man, I have a hard time seeing another movie coming along and tying or beating the current record for most Oscar wins for a movie. The record is 11. Out of the tens of thousands of films, only 3 films have ever done it. Ben-Hur, Titanic, and Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. And I just don't see that happening. James proposed that he thinks that Dune could do it. And I said, I just don't know, man, because like you even look at some of the greatest films of all time, they don't win 11. Now you say, well, yeah, but this ones can get the technical categories. Okay, fair enough. But there's a lot of every movie that comes out that has any kinds of visual effects could do it. Now you mentioned Chalamet, Bardem, Oscar Isaac, acting awards. Oscar Isaac has never won an Academy Award. Timothée Chalamet has never won an Academy Award. Javier Bardem has. But I don't think he's been even nominated. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't even think he's been nominated since his Academy Award win for No Country for Old Men. So you're talking out of the 3 of them, 1 Academy Award. I don't think there's any basis here to be presumptive. Oh, I think that this movie's really got a shot. I don't think so. I don't think so. Again, that's not to say it's impossible. But again, you got to measure this out. Out of tens of thousands of movies, 3 have won 11. 3 have won 11. Every movie that gets released could do it. Sure. Like could. Yeah, you could apply that to everything. Any movie that could possibly qualify for technical awards too, they could do it. And as far as that goes, Dune is one of them. But Dune has also had several iterations and incarnations. They've never done well. Even though I like the sci-fi miniseries. I did like the sci-fi miniseries. But aside from that, it is great source material, but it's also proved to be very difficult source material. You have a fabulous filmmaker in Denis Villeneuve. You got a great cast, absolutely. We see many movies every year with great directors and great casts come out and never come anywhere close to whiffing it. So I would say personally that Dune has a shot, but not much better than any other movie that I would say has a shot. I know, Rob, let me throw this over to you because I know you're more of a Dunanite than I am. A Dunanite. I just made that up.
Dunanite.
What do you think? Walk us through it. I'll throw this over to you and let you take this for a minute. Walk us through. What do you really think are the chances, and maybe if you break it down a little bit, of should we expect or have any sort of realistic actual anticipation that Dune could be the next movie to hit 11 Academy Awards? Should we go into the Oscar season with that sort of expectation? How do you take it? Take it away.
To be honest, I don't think so. Only because, Dune is remember, it's been adapted twice as a TV miniseries, then obviously David Lynch's film. And a lot of the stuff that's in Dune have become familiar tropes in science fiction and fantasy. And while I love Dune and I read the script and I think the script is terrific, I think that the idea of sandworms and guild navigators and Baron Harkonnen and all of that stuff is going to be a little too much for Academy voters. And it's a little too again, it's hard to say because the tone of it's really going to be the most important thing. And if it's done very seriously, I think it does have a shot to get a lot of Academy Awards. But I just don't know. And also, the biggest thing I think that it has going against it is it's only half the book. So the story itself isn't really concluded, and it kind of leaves off on perhaps, I mean, it ends in a good place, but it's not exactly, it doesn't pack the kind of a wallop that the ending of an Academy Award winner packs, if that makes any sense.
I think that makes sense.
You know?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Anyway, but again, let's not say never. I mean, it's anything's
Right.
possible. I just don't know that. I just don't think so. Anyway, let's move on here. Next one up comes to us from an anonymous viewer who sends in a $20 tip. So since you sent in something $20 or more, we're going to segment this out and put it up on the channel. Keep your eyes open for it in the coming weeks. On Saturday's show, you were talking about 80s shows like Airwolf, Magnum PI, Knight Rider, Simon & Simon, Quantum Leap. Did you know they were all done by the same guy, Donald Bellisario, who also had done JAG, which ties into NCIS. He did episodes of Battlestar Galactica. I'm not quite sure what you mean by they were done by that guy. Do you mean like he may have directed a few episodes, or was he the? I don't think he was the executive producer of those shows. I don't recognize the name.
No, he is a pretty big executive producer, creator. So I don't know if he directs.
I thought I remember the name being different for the creator of Knight Rider and stuff like that, but that's actually pretty.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he
collected.
I don't know if he did Knight Rider. I'm not sure.
I'll say, let me see if I can look this up. What's his name again?
Donald Bellisario.
Bell is. Oh, I put C. Bell. Isario. Let me see if I can find this. I'm not finding anything for any Donald. Did I mispronounce? Oh, I misspelled Donald. Maybe if I spelled Donald right. All right, Donald Bellisario. Let's see here. He was a writer for shows like Magnum PI, NCIS, JAG, Quantum Leap, Tequila, and Bonetti. I'm not familiar with that show.
He did direct Battlestar Galactica, the first one.
Was he the director of the first one there? He also wrote episodes of Airwolf, so he was a writer. He directed some episodes of CIS, JAG, First Monday, Last Rites. What was he a producer on? He
created and produced Magnum PI, Airwolf, Quantum Leap, JAG, and First Monday and NCIS.
That is a resume.
Yeah. And then he also was a producer on Quincy, Battlestar Galactica, Baba Black Sheep, Kojak. Oh, he's a writer on Kojak. Quincy. He produced Quincy.
Man, I was not familiar. I'm not as connected into the world of television, obviously. I was not even familiar with his name. Anonymous? Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, dude.
The NCIS franchise made him richer than I can't even imagine.
I can't even begin to imagine.
JAG and NCIS, that is one that you're looking at that's 25 years of constant programming. And
constant hits.
He's made billions of dollars off that show. Literally billions of dollars.
That is crazy. Excellent share, anonymous viewer. Thanks for sending that in, man. All right, let's move on here. Next up, we've got Dark Knight Rises writes, John, I'm thinking about watching some classics. A lot of stars circle back to Spencer Tracy as an inspiration in terms of great film acting. What is his technique / distinctiveness, and what films of his do you recommend? I am like, if Erin Cummings was here, she would be the better one to address that. And by the way, happy birthday to Erin Cummings. I'm pretty sure she just turned 21. I'm pretty sure it's her 21st birthday. So happy birthday to Erin. If she was here, she could speak to that. I am no actor, so I cannot speak to the methods or techniques of a Spencer Tracy. But when you're looking at Spencer Tracy, you know, it's funny. We were just talking about It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World the other day. That came up. Obviously, when you're talking Spencer Tracy, two things you have to look up. You have to look at Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, one of the all-time great movies. And that movie, by the way, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, was way ahead of its time. That movie was so far ahead of its time. And then I believe, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 417 movies that he made with Hepburn. Or something. And at least it feels like he made that many movies with Hepburn. But yeah, I look, if anybody's just gonna ask me, Spencer Tracy movie, go. It's got to be Guess Who's Coming to Dinner for me. Rob, when you look at Spencer Tracy, what stands out to you?
Well, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but I'm a huge fan of a movie called Bad Day at Black Rock.
Yep.
Directed by John Sturges. And man, what a great movie that is. Hey, by the way, another breaking news thing that happened today. Apparently, Grace Randolph has an exclusive interview with Zack Snyder about the Snyder Cut.
I don't know that that's news, but I think that might be what we were talking about when Zack Snyder mentioned that the DCEU, that the Snyder Cut is not part of the DCEU. It may have come from that one, I believe. I got it off of, not Variety. Where did I get it? I read the story, I think, on Slash Film, but anyway, so it might have come from that. All right, let's move on here. Next up, I just found out in Knives Out, the voice in the movie that Marta's sister is watching in the kitchen is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's credited on IMDb. I did know that, as a matter of fact. Yeah. I did know that. And listen, seriously. And by the way, I like that trailer that he's got with Jamie Foxx. What's it called? The Power...
Dude, doesn't that look good?
What's it called again? Power something or other. The one where you take a pill and you get a superpower for 5 minutes.
Good, man. I'm like, I want to see that.
It does look good. Power Station or something. I don't know what it's called. But anyway, Joseph Gordon-Levitt starting to make his way back into the public eye. He's kind of been absent for a little while.
By the way, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that our friend Cliff Stevenson did an amazing 2-hour documentary on the making of Knives Out that's on that Blu-ray and 4K disc. And it's really good. It's one of the best.
I finally saw it. It's amazing.
Isn't it great? It's one of the best documentaries I've seen in a long time. It's certainly one of the best special features. It harks back to the heyday of special features. He did a really good job.
Yeah, he did a remarkable job. And it's just, listen, Knives Out, guys. Believe the hype. I don't care if you're somebody who didn't like The Last Jedi. That's fine if you didn't like The Last. But Knives Out, there's a reason it got nominated for Academy Awards. Knives Out is a fabulously fun film.
It's
definitely
just so
go and check
much
it
fun,
out.
Isn't it?
It's so good. It's a great mixture of hearkening back to the old Agatha Christie style things, which is exactly what he was going for, with a modern touch of sensibility to it all at the same time, all kind of with a frantic, almost what is it I'm looking for? This frantic, like, noises off kind of comedic pacing all at the same time. You know, it's a wonderful mixture of stuff. If you haven't seen Knives Out,
and in one location, pretty much.
Yeah, a lot of the movie happens in one spot, in one house, which is really cool. All right, next up, Luke1234 writes, your editorial videos on Star Wars Episode 9 and Man of Steel were fantastic. Thank you so much, man. We put a lot of work into those, and we're very proud of those 2 editorials. So thank you so much for saying that, man. Which got me to thinking, how much of a tip donation would someone have to send in to get a video like that with the movie of their choosing?
Oh, man.
Ooh. Okay, so what he's referring to is, if you look on my YouTube channel, let me see if I can bring it up here. I'm not 100% sure I can, but let me see if I can. Yeah, I can. So on my YouTube channel, I've got these editorials that I've done called... well, I can't bring it up right now. One is The Case for Man of Steel, the most underrated comic book film of all time. It's like a 27-minute editorial video. And then one called Disney Star Wars Fan on Why Rise of Skywalker Failed 6 months later, where I just kind of walk through, as somebody who has liked all the Disney Star Wars movies, why Rise of Skywalker didn't work for me. And that's like a 20-minute editorial. So those are the ones that Luke1234 is talking about. How much would somebody have to send in for me to do one on a movie that they choose? Minimum, probably about $500, probably closer to $1,000. And here's why. I mean, that Rob, I get it. That sounds astronomical. I get it. That sounds like a ridiculous amount of money. I totally get it. It totally does. But you got to understand that it literally, the script for the Man of Steel editorial was literally over 25 pages long. it took me, and I wrote that really fast. Like I wrote that in 3 or 4 days. I wrote that script in 3 or 4 days while doing the regular show and all that kind of stuff. So it took me 3 or 4 days to write that script. And then once the script was done, I then had to record all the narration and edit the narration. And then once all that was done, I had to send the script and the narration over to fact checker Jonathan to start pulling hundreds of images and then pacing and placing the images and doing the transitions and the movement and motion on the images and stuff like that. That took him 3 or 4 days. We're talking about like a week or more worth of 2 people working on an editorial video like that. And I loved doing it. I really did. It was great fun. But yeah, we're talking about a week's worth of 2 people working on that video. So it would take a lot. There's a reason I don't make one of those videos every week. Because on top of doing all the work on the show, it's incredibly labor intensive to do those, at least to do them well and to do them properly. It takes a lot of time. So yeah, it's probably unlikely. But hey, if somebody wants to send in and say, John, here's $1,000. Can you please make one on Megaforce? Cool. I'll do one for Megaforce, Rob. You can guest star on it with me. We can talk about the glories of Megaforce together. Or you could be the detractor on it. I'm not sure which.
You know, when I was doing DVD special features in the early aughts, the formula that we had was if you wanted 1 minute of unique content, like whether it was interview material, it was $1,500 a minute, because you had to get a crew and you had to go shoot material that you'd cut together. And those are the kinds of budgets people got. Now, think about it. A YouTube video, if you have a CPM of what? $1 or something, if every million views only earns you $1,000. So it's a lot of work. You're talking about an extraordinary amount of work to do something like this. And the only thing that allows you to do it is you have to be passionate about the subject to do it well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, that's part of the big misunderstanding with YouTube and stuff like that. People think it's like, oh, if you've got a video that has 1 million views, you must have made tons of money on that. No, like, listen, my video for the death of, the case for Man of Steel has about 87 or 88,000 views. I have probably made about $140 on that video.
Yeah.
That's you make, like for me, my CPMs is around $1.50. So for every 1,000 views a video of mine gets, I get about $1.50. I mean, that's the reality of it. And so for that particular video, I made about $140. And it was fine. I did that video because it was a passion project of mine. I'm passionate about Man of Steel and I wanted to do that video. And so that's why I did that video. But for me to do one for somebody else and take like a week's worth of manpower for 2 people and put that much energy and effort into it, and I would only want to do it if I could do it right. I probably charged like $500 to $1,000 for it, to be honest with you. And even that, I would probably end up losing money, considering I'm paying, Jonathan's salary while doing it, and trying to pay my own salary while I'm doing it. It's tough. Anyway, let's move on here. Let's move on. Isaac Beebe writes, but thank you for writing that in and asking. I appreciate that, Luke. All right, Isaac Beebe writes, I want to recommend a show to you and everyone watching called The Good Doctor. It's about a young man who has autism and savant syndrome, who gets hired as a surgeon at a prestigious Californian hospital and the challenges he faces along the journey. As somebody who has autism myself, although not as severe as his, there is so much about the show that I can relate to. His acting in it, especially for someone who doesn't have autism, it's phenomenal. Yeah, and doesn't that Freddie Highmore who stars in that? The kid who starred with Johnny Depp in both the Willy Wonka movie and Finding Neverland, which, by the way, if you've not seen Finding Neverland, oh my God, watch Finding Neverland. Anyway, we won't get into that again, but I've heard good things about this show. I've heard really good things about this show. And wasn't it The Accountant where the lead character, where Ben Affleck's character had like high functioning autism as well? That's one of the things I loved about that movie. And that's one of the things that has at least made me interested in this show, The Good Doctor, because it is so different on that level. I have never seen an episode myself because I don't watch a whole ton of television. So there's a lot of good shows out there I've never watched, but The Good Doctor is one of those ones that has caught my attention. Have you ever had a chance to watch that one, Rob?
No, but you know what? Like, I don't know why I equate it with Doogie Howser just because he looks young, I guess.
Dude, when I first saw advertisements for The Good Doctor, and you see this young kid as a doctor, that's immediately where my head went. Was Doogie Howser too?
Doogie Howser. I love me some Neil Patrick Harris, and my love affair with him began with Doogie Howser. But I'll watch anything Neil Patrick Harris is in. But The Good Doctor, actually, I've heard it's a really good show.
Yeah,
so,
I've heard nothing but good things about it, so it's something I keep. Thanks for the recommendation on that, Isaac. All right, let's move on here. Next up, Isaac also writes, also, I know you don't do fan castings, but for myself, if Lucasfilm ever gets around to doing Thrawn in live action, there is one actor I think would play a perfect Thrawn, and that is Benedict Cumberbatch. Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch would fit a great into a certain vision of Grand Admiral Thrawn. But it would all depend on how they do him. Because, for instance, the Grand Admiral Thrawn in the original novels that came out, the Thrawn trilogy, he was a little bit different than the Grand Admiral Thrawn we've got in the new Thrawn novels. And the Thrawn in the new Thrawn novels is kind of different from the Thrawn they have in Rebels. Actually, I would say the Thrawn in Rebels is significantly different from the Thrawn they have in the Thrawn novels. So it would all depend on on which vision of Thrawn you wanted to have. And that would dictate who would be the best kind of actor. I've always had kind of Mads Mikkelsen in my head for a Thrawn, which is ironic because Mads Mikkelsen's brother does the voice of Thrawn in Rebels. I don't know if you knew that, but he does that. So, but hey, Benedict's a great actor. So look, you know me, bottom line is for me, just put somebody in there who's a good actor, and Benedict is definitely a great actor. All right, Mr. TJ Lynn writes, John, the other day you said you met Martin Scorsese in person, yes, but I thought he canceled you and Dennis after the long flight west to east. I've done it myself a couple of times. It was quite a long flight. Well, that was supposed to be the first time I ever met Martin Scorsese. That was supposed to be the first time. This is going back years, but back in the early, not most early, but the early-ish AMC days. So we're going back 6 or 7 years now. There was a special anniversary event, Rob, for Taxi Driver. And there was a special event going on for it at the Directors Guild Theater in New York City. And so they invited me to go down. So me and Dennis, it was last second too. It was like last minute. It was like the day before. They said, hey, do you guys want to fly to New York and go and meet and interview Martin Scorsese at this event? Neither Dennis nor I like flying. I don't like flying. I do fly. I don't stop myself from flying, but I don't like flying. And Dennis doesn't either. And so Dennis and I talked about it. We said, all right, let's do it. So we went, got on a plane, flew 5.5 hours to New York City, landed in New York City, and we were going to then go get in a cab and go directly to the Directors Guild Theater where the special event was happening. As soon as we get off the plane and turn our phones back on, we've got these messages. Scorsese canceled. After a 5.5 hour flight to New York City, we get off the plane. We're like, Scorsese had to cancel. There was some controversy that broke in a New York newspaper that day about him and his taxes or something. So he kind of said he's not going to do any interviews, although he was there at the event and he did do the Q&A and we got to be there for it. And hey, you know what? I got to meet Sam Rockwell for the first time that night. That was the first night I ever got to stand around and chat with Sam Rockwell, which was a great experience. That was awesome. I got to meet a few other people as well. We got to hear Martin Scorsese tell some great stories. It was great, but I had to meet him a number of years later. I got to meet him, but that was supposed to be the first time I ever met him. 5.5 hour flight for two guys who don't like to fly, only to land and say, oh, he just canceled. It's like, figures. Yeah, that's our story with that, TJ. All right, TJ also writes, I know you're not a fan of The Big Bang Theory. Sitcoms like that is also not my favorite. However, since the show is about nerds who are physicists working in a university, I kind of relate because I was at one time a teaching assistant in physics at a university. Well, I get that. I guess, Rob, I don't know if you ever watched Big Bang Theory. The reason it never worked I only watched about three episodes, maybe total. And maybe I watched the wrong 3 episodes. But what turned me off about the show, and I'm sure it hit other people differently in all respect, but for me, I was watching the show and to me, it struck me like this is a show about nerd culture being written by people who clearly don't actually understand nerd culture. I mean, that's the impression it made on me. So I don't know. Did you watch any of it?
Yeah, when it first started, I did, because a lot of people compared it to the film that I had made, and I agree with you. I felt that it was incredibly inauthentic. You know, there was a show, I don't know if you ever saw, that Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg made in England called Spaced.
Yeah, Dick Frost was with them too, was he not?
Yeah. And Spaced, to me, was the show that was the most legit nerd show. But I understand somebody had an idea, and Big Bang Theory to me, it was just one cliche after another, and it was very difficult to watch. But it turned out to be one of the most successful sitcoms of all time, so what the hell do I know?
All right, let's move on here. Next up, TJ Linos writes, do you think that Killers of the Flower Moon will be scrapped off entirely due to its ridiculously expensive price tag because it's irresponsible to use that kind of money to make a drama film in current environment we're living in today? Well, here's the thing, TJ. Nothing's changed. Apple knew how much it was going to cost when they signed up. They didn't then go 5 minutes later, maybe we shouldn't do this. No, Apple knew. And Apple is the company that is financing Killers of the Flower Moon, the new Martin Scorsese flick that's supposed to have Leonardo DiCaprio in it as well. They already knew what the price tag was going to be. It's not like they signed this deal 3 years ago, and today, 3 years later, context has changed. They just signed this deal like a month or two ago. So nothing has changed. So any project can get scrapped at any time. I don't see there being any reason to believe that there would be a bigger chance of this movie getting scrapped, considering they just signed that deal and everybody knew how much it was going to cost when they entered into it. So Apple wants prestige stuff right now. Apple wants to be considered a player in the game. And Apple has all the money in the world. So for them to go, $200 million for us to get our foot in the door and to become a player in this game? Sure. Let me just reach into my back pocket. And there you go, $200 million. So yeah, I don't expect that getting canceled. All right, Mr. TJ Lynn also writes, as a movie pundit, I'm going out on a limb and saying that you can stand a gory movie, violence, torture, or crazy sex stuff like Hostel or something similar. I can. But what about Anne and your close friends? Do they have a stomach to watch that kind of stuff? Well, Anne does. As far as close friends, all my friends are different. Some of them can, some of them can't, just like most groups of friends. Rob, what about you? Like, are you good? I know you're good for watching that kind of stuff, but like, what about Elizabeth or some of the other people? Do you have do your friends generally are all cool with watching that stuff too? Or do you sometimes got to measure that out?
You know, I think it's important when you're going to watch things with friends or significant others that you have some awareness of what they do and don't like. You know, but for the most part, people will watch most things. But like, you know, I wouldn't watch. There are certain things I'm not going to say, hey, let's all watch this. You know, you kind of got to read the room.
All right, let's move on. Next up, TJ also writes, before the pandemic, I used to go to the movies 3 times a month. Am I a casual moviegoer? No, I'd say you're more than a casual moviegoer because like the average person goes to the movies, I think it was 4 times a year. The average person goes to movies, I believe it's like 4 to 6 times a year. If you're going 3 times a month, you're going to 36 movies a year. That puts you well above average. Maybe you're not the hardest of hardcore who goes to like 7 movies a month, but if you're going to 36 movies a year, TJ, I'd say that puts you well above the average. So I would say you are probably more than just a casual moviegoer. All right, TJ also writes, I don't know about you, but I have a strong feeling Oscars 2021 will be canceled, which is a shame. What's the repercussions if that really happens? There's not a lot of repercussions, Rob. I mean, it's just a shame, right? If they have to cancel the Oscars, it's just a shame. Now, they've already bumped the Oscars to April? I think they bumped it to April. Yes, they bumped it to April.
Is there going to be anything that they can even put in the Oscars?
That's the thing. The more this goes on, if you had asked me a month and a half ago, it's like, no, the Oscars aren't going to be a thing. But now we're a month later and everything has changed. It's like, well, in these circumstances, yeah, maybe it will. But ultimately, what are the repercussions? All the repercussions would be for the Oscars themselves, really not for anything else. So I don't see there being any wider repercussions. Do you, Rob? Like, what could that affect?
No, I mean, other than the fact that, look, I think that we're going through this is a crazy disruptive period of time. But we crave normality as well. So I think when things eventually open up and this virus is no longer an issue, I mean, remember when Spanish flu ravaged the world, millions of people were dying, millions. And the world basically went back to normal. Yeah, the roaring 20s and then the Great Depression afterwards. But for the most part, I think that eventually things will go back to normal. It isn't the Oscars' fault. People like the Oscars. We like movies. Our love affair with cinema is not going to go anywhere. And I think the Oscars are pretty much for almost a century now have been ingrained in our lives. And aside from people that get cynical about it, who doesn't like the Oscars? I mean, if we love our movies, we like to see the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, and the Oscars are a night where you can watch the arrivals and see what people are wearing and talk about how much better you are than those Hollywood elites, right? People love that. I love it. John, I have loved the Oscars since I was a little kid, and I would hate to see it go away. The Motion Picture Academy has their beautiful new museum to open up. I think that when things go back to normal or relatively go back to normal, people are going to love movies more than ever before. And I think the Oscars are going to come back maybe stronger than ever.
Yeah, I mean, Oscars, other than Christmas is my favorite day of the year. Other than Christmas, Oscars is my second favorite day of the year, even more than my own birthday. Oscars is my second favorite day of the year. But hey, listen, Rob, we're past 10:30. We know you got things that you've got to do and get to. So thank you for being here. We'll see you again tomorrow, of course. But in the meantime, Rob, where can people follow you and your adventures online?
Well, you can follow me sporadically on Twitter at BurnettRM. You can follow me on Instagram at Robert Meyer Burnett, or you can find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work, and my show, Robservations.
And you know what? We'd be remiss, while I've got you here, I just realized this. If we didn't just take a second with having you here. Of course, yesterday marked the 2-year anniversary of the passing of John Schnepp. Yeah. Whose shadow, I wrote on my Facebook, I said his shadow is still cast, his presence is still missed is still noticeable by its absence. And he was the best of us. And, you know, to me, he was the living embodiment of the geek culture. Like if you said, take geek culture, now make it into physical form, your result would have been John Schnepp. He was the living, this 6'4" living representation of a geek culture that he loved so much. And I remember, Rob, you and I had already known for a number of days that he was gone. We had already known that, but the day they officially let it be announced, you and I had just finished we had just done our panel at Comic-Con.
At Comic-Con.
We had just finished a panel. We walked out of the room from the panel. We turned on our phones, and we all saw that they had made it official, that John had officially passed away. And I remember just the sweep. You looked around, and you could tell other people had just saw that news too. And yeah. Anyway, Rob, you're just quickly, I don't want to keep you, but your reflections on the marking the 2 years since it's hard to believe it's been 2 years.
Well, you know, I posted a picture yesterday that was taken in 2014 in front of the Chinese Theater when Godzilla had opened there. And a bunch of my friends, Cliff Stevenson was there, and a bunch of my friends I have known for years, and John was there. And they had in the courtyard this kind of weird Godzilla sculpture. And in the picture, all of us look serious, and John's in the back because he's taller than all of us, and his mouth was open, roaring, and his hands were up like this, you know, rawr! And I put it on my Instagram feed, and you know, that's how I remember John. I remember, and I said in my caption, I go, this is how I remember John Schnepp, but being on the inside. If you could describe his personality from the inside out, it was that. It was him roaring with delight, being in front of a giant Godzilla sculpture in front of the Chinese Theater. Because, you know, I know John for years, and he was always working on something cool. But I think what I loved about John the most is that John Schnepp celebrated other people's creativity. He loved when people made cool stuff, you know, whether it was posters or T-shirts or TV shows or comic books. You know, nobody got excited about other people's stuff more than John Schnepp. He loved people's creativity because other people's creativity didn't threaten John. John, he did his own thing. He was making his own stuff all the time. And he just loved when people were enthusiastic and created things. He loved meeting fans. And he had a really big heart. John, I met you. I was on the 6th episode of what was then AMC Heroes. It was in April of 2015. And John had called me up to be on this show, and I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. I mean, I wouldn't have been on YouTube if it wasn't for John Schnepp. And you know, throughout the years, yeah, he asked me once, he made this cool video called They Coming about zombie Muppets. He'd made this zombie Muppet thing that was really cool. And he said, hey man, because he knew I knew the guy who put on the Masquerade at Comic-Con, and he said, can you get this shown at the Masquerade? And I did, you know, this zombie Muppet thing that John was going to, I mean, he was always making something or doing something. And, you know, he always was funny. Like that guy, he had the soul of what I would say was an animator. When his wit and the stuff that he would come up with, the zingy one-liners that, you know what it was like being on a show with him when he would do that nerd voice of his and make some. I mean, the guy was so funny and so much fun to hang around with. I miss him every day, really, because he was the kind of guy that I met him over the course of time in LA, hanging out at various things, and over the years had run into him, and I really appreciated his talent and his enthusiasm, but it was just, whenever I saw him, you couldn't help but smile. He would always say something that put a smile on your face. And there's not a lot of people in the world I can say that about. But that's how I imagined, and that's how I remember John, is that whenever I hung out with him, whether we did a show, that's a great pic. That's a great picture, dude.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one.
I mean, that was, and by the way, he always had the best geeky shirts.
Oh, he was king of the shirts, man.
King of the t-shirts, man. I mean, my t-shirt game, I've stepped up, but what a just a great presence, you know. And I would say that it was a life. He lived a good life. You know, he had people that loved him, and he did a lot of great work, and he left us with a legacy, like you said, that he was. If one person could embody what great geek culture was, it would be John Schnepp.
Yep, and again, he was the best of us. He was the best of us. Anyway, Rob, thanks for sharing your thoughts, and we'll see you again later. And thanks for being here, man. We'll talk to you again soon. All
right, talk to you tomorrow.
All right, take care, man. All right, guys, that was one Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, of course, and he will be back again tomorrow, of course. So, but in the meantime, guys, let's keep things rolling with your live questions. Let's get on over there. And the next one up comes to us from ZOMG Ruler, who writes, there is one hope for films. With Walmart making 160 location drive-ins soon, maybe other megastores like Target can follow suit, and maybe their parking lots wide release. Only downside, no daytime screenings. How many drive-ins are needed for a $100 million weekend? Well, here's the thing. There's only a couple of hundred, there's only a few hundred drive-ins left in the country. There's only a few hundred left. Now, for those of you who missed what ZOMG is talking about, is that Walmart is going to take 160 of their locations and actually turn their parking lots into drive-ins, right? Which is great. That's 160. Most films that hit like $100 million opening weekend, and only the very, very minority of movies hit $100 million opening weekend, but most films that do open to over 3,000 screens. So put that in perspective, right? Most films that hit like $100 million opening weekend will open on 1,000 or 3,000 screens. We're talking about Walmart adding 160. That might take the total in the country up to about maybe 500, 600. So I don't think we're going to be seeing any opening weekend box office numbers that hit like $100 million. I don't think that's going to happen. It would take a hell of a lot more drive-ins, but hey, right now people are starting to appreciate the drive-ins. Ann and I are going to the drive-in this Wednesday, and I'm super stoked about that. All right, let's move on here. Next up, we've got Willow writes, In Terminator 1, it stated that only living tissue, we've been talking about this for a couple of days, it stated that only living tissue can be sent back. Maybe the T-1000 perfectly mimics the structure of living cells and clothing. So it had to be naked because the time machine wouldn't accept clothes even if it's a part of the T-1000's body. See, yeah, that was also a big part of the thing, that the time travel portal, only organic matter can travel through, right? Well, the T-1000 was liquid metal. Its whole appearance, it wasn't actually living tissue, but maybe it mimicked it. Okay, well then why couldn't it come through with clothes and have it mimic that same properties? Or on top of that, you know, why didn't he, if he did have to come through naked because it had to look like flesh, why didn't he just immediately take on clothes? Well, he can only imitate stuff when he touched. Yeah, but there's lots of clothes in the time period it came in. It's not something that I get upset about. It's not something that upsets me. It's just one of those funny little loopholes that is fun to talk about every once in a while, Willow. But hey, that's a good theory. Willow, your theory there is as good as any theory I've heard so far. All right, Lee Mallinson writes, Sonia, if I want backup, oh, this is from Mortal Kombat. If I want backup, I'll radio for it. Such a cheesy line. Scorpion and Sub-Zero, then enter. This moment in Mortal Kombat was my first ever geek out moment. I remember jumping out of my seat and shadow boxing in the cinema aisle. Do you remember your first ever geek out moment? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if I remember my first ever geek out moment. I mean, I probably had one before this, but I go back to The Phantom Menace. Because say what you will about The Phantom Menace, and I have lots to say about The Phantom Menace, but that movie's opening is great. I love when they show up on the Trade Federation ships and they're immediately getting attacked and they pull out their lightsabers and they start cutting these battle droids down. I love that. And I remember really geeking out in theaters. I'm sure I did before that as well, but I can't remember off the top of my head what that would have been before that. But that would definitely be one of the big ones. I don't think I geeked out in the Mortal Kombat one, but I do remember, I do love Mortal Kombat. It's a terrible, terrible movie, but I love it dearly regardless. All right, thanks for sharing that, Lee. All right, Man of Steel Rules writes, John, I personally hated the Martha scene in Batman vs. Superman. Lots of people did. I thought it was cheesy. That was until I watched your Defending the Martha scene video that I made this weekend. And you're right. It's an important scene that I underestimated. I rewatched Batman vs. Superman and now I get it. Damn, you're good. Well, okay. So for those of you who don't know what Man of Steel Rules is talking about, I did a video a while ago, a long time ago, called Defending the Martha Scene. Why did you say that name? I made this video called Defending the Martha Scene because I actually believe when I watched that scene the first time, my first reaction to it was this deeper meaning to what was going on other than, wait a minute, your mother's name is the same as my mother's name? Or did we just become best friends? You know, that sort of, I saw a lot more to it. And so I made this little video explaining what it was that I interpreted in that scene and how I, to this day, still interpret that scene, what I think the meaning was. Now, it's Zack Snyder's fault that he didn't more clearly communicate what was actually going on in that scene. But I got what he was going for. At least what I interpreted. And I thought what he was going for in that scene was actually pretty deep. And so if you want to know what I'm talking about, I'm sure just look up John Campea Defending the Martha Scene. Just search that on YouTube. I'm sure it'll be the first video that comes up. And thanks for the kind words, Man of Steel. I appreciate that, man. All right, Alan writes, hey, John, James Gunn has said that in the next Guardians of the Galaxy movie, a character will die. If this does happen, who do you think it could be? And who do you think could come in and join the team? I would love to see Beta Ray Bill. I think you're probably going to be saving that for Thor at some point. His face was on Grandmaster's Tower. Yes, it was. But again, I think you're probably going to see that. If we see Beta Ray Bill at all, I think you're going to see him in a Thor thing proper rather than Guardians of the Galaxy. Even though there is precedent in the comics for that, I understand that. Who could die? I don't know. I'm guessing, look, it could be Drax the Destroyer for a couple of reasons. I think they have really misused Drax, and they've turned Drax, like, I love Drax in the first Guardians movie. But remember, Drax the Destroyer is supposed to be this guy who was basically genetically made to take out Thanos. And in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, he is clearly a supreme badass. But even in James Gunn's own Guardians of the Galaxy 2, they really neutered Drax. You had Drax the Destroyer who had no action scenes. What the hell? Literally, Drax the Destroyer, no action scenes in Guardians 2. And then even the way they used him in the Avengers movies, I thought was pretty lame. They never let Drax the Destroyer do anything. And they kind of just started using Drax as comic relief. And he's great as comic relief. Don't get me wrong, he is great as comic relief. I think Dave Bautista, working with the right directors, he really found a niche with that character and how to really do great comedic timing with that character. But when you combine the fact that they really haven't done anything with Drax, combined with the fact that Dave Bautista got real negative about Disney when he was defending James Gunn, and I always applauded him for it. The way that he stood by James Gunn while everything was going on. And he said some real negative things about Disney, even coming out publicly and saying, Disney, fire me. I don't want to be in your movies anymore. Fire me. When you combine that with the fact that they really haven't done much with Drax, I wouldn't be surprised if Drax is the one they end up killing off. So we'll have to wait and see. All right, next up. Jordan Risley writes, hey, John, I want to know what you think is more important to a movie if you had to sacrifice one for the other. A cast full of talent or the best story or plot to the movie. Story or plot to the movie is always the first thing. You can work with actors. You can get them to communicate what it is, what you need. That's the number one job of the director, is to get the right performance out of the actors. So if I could either choose an all-star, super high caliber cast, or I had to pick the best story or plot for this movie, take the best screenplay every day. All day, every day, twice on Sunday. And then get a bunch of unknown actors with a good director who can get as good of a performance as you can. A good story can overshadow some questionable acting. The best acting cannot overcome a bad story. So if I had to choose between the two, Jordan, by the way, I just noticed you sent in $20. Thank you for supporting that. So I will we'll clip this one out and put it up as its own video here in the upcoming weeks. So yeah, if I had to pick one, man, script every single time. Now, if you tell me, even then if you tell me, but John, I'm not just saying an all-star cast. You either can have a good cast or a terrible cast. The actors will all be awful. I'll still take the better screenplay. Because if your starting block is a good story can overcome a lot. It's not every time, all the time, no matter what, but a good story can overcome a lot of other weaknesses, including some questionable performances. I would rather take some questionable performances than a questionable story. Give me the better story every single time. So that's just kind of the way I would go with that. Some different people may have different opinions of that, and I'm not undermining the importance of actors. The importance of actors is paramount, but even more important than that is the story, because the characters are not there to be served by the story. The characters are there to serve the story. Story comes first, so that's where I'll go with that, Jordan. Thanks for the question, man. Great question. All right, Ryan Lohner writes, I just found out Cyborg's father on Doom Patrol was also Jackie Childs in Seinfeld. I had no idea about that. This is the most public yet of my many humiliations. I don't remember the episode. I'm a big Seinfeld fan, but I don't remember that episode. But that's because it is funny. Whenever Cyborg's dad is on screen, I get this, like, where do I know this? You know, every once in a while you see a guy and you're like, how do I know this guy? He's one of those guys whenever he's on screen. So that maybe it's because of Seinfeld. Maybe subconsciously I just recognize him from Seinfeld. Thank you for pointing that one out, Ryan. All right, Taj and Cars writes, 1 of 2. John, I rewatched Jack Nicholson's Wolf for the first time in over 2 decades and realized that Christopher Plummer plays a publishing company owner who lives in an eerily similar estate as Knives Out. Him and the house play such a significant role in the movie Cooler to Watch. Not the best Nicholson movie or the best werewolf flick, but definitely a good watch on a lazy day. I bet Blumhouse could remake the hell out of this film for less than the cost of a Zevia commercial. Well, and they are working on a Wolfman movie, as a matter of fact, so there's that. Yeah, listen, that movie Wolf is a movie that to me never really lived up to its potential. Besides Jack Nicholson, you also have Michelle Pfeiffer, and James Spader was in there too. Voice of Ultron, Red Reddington from The Blacklist as well. So you got Michelle Pfeiffer, Jack, you got David, you got Spade in there. I never loved it. I never loved it. Actually, let me pull something up here. Wolf, IMDb. Let me see here. Wolf, 1994. It was directed by Mike Nicholas, he also directed movies like Charlie Wilson's War, which I really liked. Obviously, Wolf. Working Girl, which is like a classic comedy. The original Catch-22, he directed The Graduate. Primary Colors, that John Travolta movie, which I always thought was underrated. I think Primary Colors is an underrated film. Anyway, James Spader. Did I say David Spade earlier? James Spader, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jack. I just never felt like that movie lived up to its potential. I'm not going to lie, I was always a little bit disappointed in the film. Not tremendously disappointed, just a little bit disappointed. All right, next up. Wear a Goddamn Mask writes, what do you think Disney will do with Die Hard? Personally, I want them to leave it alone. I have very little interest in a sixth film. Die Hard 4 through 5 were terrible, and on top of it, Bruce Willis just does lame VOD movies now, and he doesn't give a shit. It's true. Honestly, I think what happens now is I think they leave it alone. If anything, I think they might reboot it at some point. Don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you right now that they're going to reboot Die Hard. But I think at this point, with Bruce Willis and his track record, like he clearly just doesn't care anymore. And I think the mystique of the Die Hard brand has long since died. So I think if they ever do something with Die Hard, it'll be a reboot. That's kind of where I think they're at right now. So I agree with you, Mask. I really do. All right, Mask also writes, also, have you heard about the behind-the-scenes drama with Doolittle? Apparently, the original cut was a lot darker, but Universal and Robert Downey Jr. hated it and brought 2 new directors to reshoot most of the film to make it more kiddie, which is why the film is so sloppy and scatterbrained. I doubt that. Honestly, I don't think the kiddiness of it is what made it sloppy or scatterbrained. I'll bet money that the version of Doolittle we got was probably better than what it was going to be, and it was still terrible. Look, there's just so much wrong with that movie. And anything, I can only imagine how much worse it probably would have been if they went with the original thing. It's hard to imagine anything worse than what we got. Doolittle's not the worst movie of all time. It had some redeeming qualities. But to me, one of the things that stands out about Doolittle is the fact that it's the first movie I saw with Robert Downey Jr. where I said, not that I said I didn't like this movie, because Robert Downey Jr. has been in movies I don't like, but it's the first time I've ever seen Robert Downey Jr. where I went, Robert Downey Jr. was not good in this. He did not give a good performance. That's never happened to me before, and it happened in that. And again, I don't think making it more family-friendly is what made it sloppy. I got a feeling it was probably, and I'm just speculating, I got a feeling it was probably even worse than what we eventually got on the screen. Hard to imagine, but that's my guess at this point. Oh, what a wasted that movie was. All right, Curtis Lopez writes, with the success of Hamilton on Disney Plus, over under 25%, Disney puts out other Broadway shows on Disney Plus like Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Mary Poppins, especially since Broadway is shut down right now. Well, there is a streaming service. There's a Broadway streaming service you can get that has all the big Broadway shows on it that are kind of like Hamilton. They're multicam setups, recordings of these big popular Broadway shows. My wife is actually subscribes to it. She's a subscriber to it, and you can get it on Roku or whatever else. You're not going to repeat the phenomena of Hamilton because unlike Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Mary Poppins, unlike all of those things, there's never been a previous movie version of Hamilton, right? And other than people who've been lucky enough to see it in theaters, the vast majority of people out there have only heard about the brilliance that is Hamilton and never had a chance to see it, right? Everybody's seen Lion King, everybody's seen Aladdin, everybody's seen Beauty and the Beast, everybody's seen all those. So there's a novelty to now seeing a stage version of it, but it would not repeat the incredible success that Hamilton has had on Disney Plus because it comes from a very different set of circumstances. So they could do it. I suppose they could. Nothing wrong with doing it. But again, there's another streaming service that already has that kind of stuff. And I just don't think Disney would see the same type of people flocking to the service to watch it because they've already got the original movies, which was not the case with Hamilton. And if you have not watched Hamilton, guys, watch Hamilton. I was lucky enough to see it in theaters or see it in the live stage show and then watch it on Disney Plus. If you haven't watched it, you absolutely should. Believe the hype about Hamilton, guys. Believe the hype. All right, next up. Marie Seifring writes, "Hey, John, it's not just Tenet. I saw an IndieWire post predicting that No Time to Die will move to 2021. That's a prediction. They haven't officially said that yet. Instead of cutting 43 minutes of screen time to make the 2-hour runtime requirement in China. Thank you and the crew." Yeah, and it's not just Tenet that it could affect. Like, if China holds on to this 2-hour time limit for, say, the rest of the year, and we don't know they will, China could pull the 2-hour time limit in 3 weeks. We don't know. It's indefinite. They just haven't said when it would be up. But if they last it through the rest of the year, which we don't know that they'll do that, but let's assume for a second they will, it's going to affect a number of movies, not just Tenet. Tenet's just the immediate one it's going to affect. But there are others, and you're absolutely bang on the money, Marie. Others like the James Bond film, and maybe others that are over 2 hours and had aspirations of playing in China. Could affect a number of them. You're absolutely right. All right, Zach Tyler writes, 1 of 5. Here we go. One of my favorite movie theater memories. I went to the 12 a.m. opening of Return of the King with a girl. I also went to the opening 12 a.m. with a girl who was a friend of mine. We both had tickets, but only found one seat. That doesn't sound right. If they sold you the ticket, there was probably another seat. There would have been another seat. She didn't want to leave. Not wanting to disappoint her, I asked the people in the seats to the left and right if my solution would bother them. With their approval, I sat her on my lap. So there would have been other seats in the theater. You guys just didn't want to sit apart from each other, which is perfectly understandable. I allowed her to sit on my lap the whole movie. It was not easy, but I did my best to keep a brave face. Eventually, Sam and Frodo's big scene played with his friend in his arms. Sam says, I can't carry it for you, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry you. The coincidence was not lost on her. The music began to swell. She turned her attention to me. Her eyes welled up with tears and sparkled slightly as they trickled down her cheek. I felt her grip on me tighten as she looked down on me with a smile that shined so brightly in the light of the Erendil would seem dim next to it. And at that moment, she leaned in and we shared our first kiss, long, deep, and forever branded into my memory. Credits rolled. She rushed off to pee. I had to sit through most of the credits before my legs were able to function again. Totally worth it. Again, that's a great story, Zach. And again, it kind of speaks to the whole thing that movies are shared experiences. As watching movies at home is bullshit. I mean, I don't care what you think you have as far as a home theater system goes. Your home theater system sucks compared to a real movie theater. That is the best experiences. And movies are at their best shared experiences. And I also remember, I went with a friend of mine. Her name was Milana. I went with my friend Milana. We weren't romantically involved. Like I think I was dating somebody at the time. I think she was too, but we were friends. And I still remember that was a great bonding moment. Went to this movie. I remember going with my buddy Rodney to see the first Wolverine movie. Went to go see X-Men Origins Wolverine. I still remember going to see that. I talk a lot about my memory of my best friend growing up who died a couple of years ago, Brendan. He and I went to watch Batman 89. We were just kids, man. We got on a bus, went downtown Hamilton, went to go see at Jackson Square Movie Theater. We went to go see the Tim Burton movie Batman. First time I ever saw online. That is the key about movies, man. They create these shared experiences. You know, we see a lot of people writing into the show about this movie is always special to them because it was the last movie they saw with their brother or their uncle or something along those lines. Movies at their best are shared experiences. And it's one of the many reasons why I never want the actual, real, authentic movie theater experience to ever go away. You lose half of the magic of the movies. At least 50%, maybe 60% of the real magic of the movies is lost if the movie theaters go away. And that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it, because of stories like that, Zach. Thanks for sharing your story, man. I appreciate that. All right. Estevel writes, this 2-hour movie limit from China is a bit ridiculous. A Hamilton show would not have been allowed to play since it goes over 2 hours. You can't suppress art. Eliminating the half-hour trailers before the movies start would be a great idea. I mean, listen, China may have done a lot to suppress art. This particular move is not about suppressing art. This particular move, because there are other movies that are in 2 hours can play. They don't care. It's just by their logic, and I'm not saying I agree, but by their logic, look, if you are in a room with somebody with COVID, the longer you're in that room, the higher the chances are you get it. The shorter you're in that room, the less the chances are. So they decided to set a 2-hour limit. Whether that's a good idea or a bad idea is up to everybody else. But listen, I've always said this. I say it about our own government. I'll say about any government. Even if I disagree, I never hold it against a government too much if their true motivation is protecting their society and their people. If that's the true motivation behind something, even if I think you're making the wrong decision, I can't really fault it. And listen, there are other Western movies that are under 2 hours that they can play in Chinese theaters. If that's their motivation, I don't blame them. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't necessarily blame them either. And then you just got to decide if you want to play your movie in China or not, if it's worth waiting for. But I believe it's Esteval. I'm with you in the sense that I believe the movie is definitely up for debate. David Crabtree writes, so I'm back to work today after being furloughed. Oh, good for you, man, since March. That's awesome. Congratulations, man. In honor of this, here's a few favorite workplace films. Secret of My Success. I love that. Waiting, the Ryan Reynolds one. 9 to 5, the Dolly Parton classic. Up in the Air. We were just talking about Anna Kendrick the other day. She got an Academy Award nomination for that. Office Space, one of the classics. Gung Ho, Michael Keaton. Anchorman, one of the greats. Boiler Room. Devil Wears Prada. 13 Going on 30. My wife loves 13 Going on 30. With Jennifer Garner and Mark Ruffalo before he was Mark Ruffalo. Like, Mark Ruffalo was in that movie with Jennifer Garner, and at the time, he wasn't a big star. He was just some actor in that role, right? I mean, he had done stuff before, but he wasn't, people didn't know the name Mark Ruffalo. That wasn't a household name at the time. And it's so funny going back to see that. That's a nice list, David. And again, congratulations, man, on our return to work. That's good. That's good stuff, man. All right, next up, Mark C. writes, concerning China, there comes a time when principle must outweigh financial gain. Bowing to a communist country that is increasing its influence over this country cannot be a good thing. I think that's a straw man argument, Mark. This isn't about that. This isn't about that. China doesn't care if your movies are 4 hours long or 1 hour long. This isn't like a situation of China saying, you didn't portray China very well in this movie. Change your movie. This isn't that at all. This is like saying, look, we're setting a time limit in our theaters. If you want to put them in here, great. If not, whatever. This isn't a communist thing. This isn't a dictatorship thing. This is simply one country saying, hey, by the way, and there are other countries just not opening their movie theaters at all. China's saying, okay, we'll open our movie theaters, but we feel like we got to put a time limit on the movies that we play. So we're going to say 2 hours. China doesn't give a shit if your movies are 5 hours long. They don't care. They're just saying if they're going to play movies and our things, they got to be 2 hours long. And the reality is, like, this isn't a political thing. Like, there are other movies where, like, China tries to put pressure on movies to change their movies because of some fundamental doctrine or whatever. This has nothing to do with that. There are times when that is the issue, and that's worth having the discussion then. But this, Mark, is nothing to do with that. It's about saying, hey, look, we'll open our theaters, but 2 hours maximum. Now it's up for you to decide, is that market big enough and important enough that you go, well, you know, if right now they're only allowing 2 hours and we think we can get like 20% of our box office from there, is it worth it to us to wait? It's not about, you know, bowing to a communist country. It's about, hey, there's a huge market over there. Right now, they've got a time limit rule that they're saying because of COVID. There are other markets, not even they're opening their movie theaters at all. At least they're giving us an option. And it's about time length of movie. It's not about a philosophy. It's not about a doctrine. It's not about propaganda. It's just about how long are we willing to let a movie play in our theaters? And what I find, Mark, is that everybody is a world-class expert on what other people should do with their money. It's easy for us to say what a studio should do. It's not your money. It's their money. And again, if this was a situation where China said, I don't know, we believe time travel is against the tenets of the communist, you know, manifesto. Take out time travel out of Tenet or else you can't play in China. That's a different situation. This is not that. So let's not confuse the issues, all right? The issue at hand here is there is a big major movie market that is, for their own reasons, saying we're putting a 2 hour cap on that. Now you got to decide, is the amount of return on investment for your property worth waiting for that market to open back up? Or is it not worth waiting? We say, you know what? It's not that important to us. We'll just go ahead and release it everywhere else. It's really that this is a dollars and cents issue. It's not about bowing to any other market. It's not about that at all. It's just about a simple pragmatic thing. There are other times where it is, but this is not one of those times. All right, Russell Amador writes, Hey, John, with the release dates for movies shifting so often in this crazy climate, do you see New Mutants reaching their release date? Will Disney decide to bless the world and just say screw it and drop it on Disney Plus? Thoughts? No. There are two reasons why they're not just going to drop it on Disney Plus. Number one is they've clearly shown they're committed to this movie getting a theatrical release. And I believe right now it's scheduled, what, August? I think it's late August. It's like August 28th. Hold a second. New Mutants release date. New Mutants is currently, end of August. August 28th is when it's supposed to come out. It's possible New Mutants could come out on August 28th. New Mutants was never going to play in China, so that's not a part of the problem. It's possible, but it could get bumped, but it's not going to drop. They're not going to drop it on streaming. The other big reason that it's not going to drop on Disney Plus is because when Fox made that movie, they signed a licensing agreement with HBO. So when New Mutants goes to streaming for the first time, it's got to go to HBO. So Disney doesn't even have the option right now to say, we're going to release it on Disney Plus. Now, they could go behind the scenes and pay HBO a big chunk of money to buy back those licensing rights. You could do that. Is New Mutants worth that type of money? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But as all other things being equal, Disney's already shown they're committed to a theatrical release for New Mutants. Number two, as of right now, the rights for first streaming for New Mutants doesn't belong to Disney. It belongs to HBO. So we're going to have to see. How that all comes about. I'll tell you what, though, the newest trailer they just showed is awesome. I love that new trailer. I'm actually getting kind of excited for that movie. All right, let's see here. Next up, Diamond Dog's Puppy writes, welcome back, John. Thank you so much. I've been quite busy like yourself lately. Great that you were not gone for too long of a time. Yeah, we were just shut down for 3 weeks. A mental relaxation is a must for clear sanity. Hopefully, after this pandemic is solved, I can go away for a bit. It has been forever. Yeah, listen, man, I'm telling you what, I took my first break in like 4 years. I actually took a actual vacation, and I didn't even go anywhere, and it was still working, but whatever. I took a little bit of a break, and it was necessary and needed, and I want to do it again soon. Maybe not 3 weeks worth, but I do want to do it again soon, so I encourage you to do that for yourself, Diamond Dog. All right, Ready Teddy Seti writes, we only got a couple of minutes left here, guys. Hey, John, today is Release the Ayer Cut Day. Do you think we will prevail a second time? Ayer made a good point. It's unfair directors get blamed for making bad movies when the studios went Edward Scissorhands on the director's vision. Thoughts? Well, I mean, listen, there are only... Every time people complain about studio interference, every movie the studios get involved in, because it's their movie. It's not the director's movie. It's their movie, right? Every single movie, the studios interfere. Except when the movie turns out good, we call it collaboration. When the movie doesn't turn out good, we call it interference. There have only been like 3 or 4 examples I can think of in my lifetime where the studios actually Edward Scissorhand the movie. The 2 most prominent ones today are Suicide Squad, and the other one is Fantastic Four, Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. So, I mean, Snyder was a different situation altogether. I mean, there's a lot of weird circumstances surrounding the Snyder one, so we put that in its own category. But yeah, those 2. So, I mean, I don't think they have any desire to release a different cut of that. Even David Ayer himself says, nah. And I think David Ayer even said, look, it'd be cool, but I don't even really see the point of it. So, I don't think so. You know what's funny? I still like the movie. It was a hot mess. I still had fun. Like enough of David Ayer's stuff was still in there that it shined through that I still had a good time with Suicide Squad. I know a lot of people hate it, and that's fine, but I still had I got a kick out of it. All right, last question of the day, guys. Diamond Dog's Puppy writes, been a while since I have done this. Underrated movie of the day is 1997's Nothing to Lose, starring Martin Lawrence and Tim Robbins. Numerous classic funny scenes and great supporting cast with Dr. Cox and Gus Fring. That's right. The guy from Giancarlo Esposito, and I forget the name of the actor who played that in Scrubs. But anyway, yes. And also, by the way, oddly enough, We obviously talked the other day about the passing of John Travolta's wife, Kelly Preston. Kelly Preston was also in Nothing to Lose with Martin Lawrence and Tim Robbins. I like Martin Lawrence and I love Tim Robbins. I got to tell you, I got to admit, I was not a big fan of that particular movie. I was not a fan of that particular movie myself. So, take that for what it's worth. All right, guys, listen, there are still a few questions left, but we have run out of time right now. So do not worry, guys. What we're going to do is, on tomorrow's installment of the John Campea Show, we will start off the Q&A with your questions that we didn't have enough time to get around to. There's only a few left, but we will start off tomorrow's show with your questions. And by the way, guys, in the meantime, you can start also sending in questions for that show. The earlier you send them in, the earlier they get read. streamlabs.com/movieblogtv/tip. Thank you so much, guys, for being here and making this show a part of your day. A special thank you to all of you guys who sent in the questions because, number one, you gave us great fun things to talk about. Number two, you supported the channel while you did it. So thanks so much, guys, for being here. We'll be back again tomorrow. My name is John Campea, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.